Oh, you're talking about this right here. I want to check.
Okay.
That was our number, look, we only had. Okay, so,
Can I, come? I'm just gonna, instead of flash drive.
yeah, let me get yours. We go through the agenda.
I just need.
Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank y'all for coming out on a Saturday morning. It's a small group. This is one of several workshops we're going to try and put together this year, and they're free to you as education majors in our program. What we're trying to do is give you some resources, some strategies to better prepare you for the praxis. A lot of times individuals go into the praxis and they just take it because they say, let me take it, see what it's like. That doesn't help you. All that does is show that you didn't know what you should, going in there, and it can make that situation even stressful. So what we're going to do is give you some strategies today. I'm going to go through the agenda. Again, I'm Camille Goins. I work with the School of Education, particularly with the FATE education program. So I'm working with pre-service teachers and in-service teachers. And one of our priorities is also to help them get licensed and pass the praxis. But what we're finding is that a lot of individuals just don't have some basic test-taking strategies, what to look for. The praxis and the Pearson exams, they're very specific on what they're asking you to do and what you should know. With the Pearson, you're taking up to 3 or 4 exams. Some of the high school, you're taking 2 exams. So what are you looking for? So that's what we're going to help you prepare with today. Some mindfulness test prep. We've reached out to the counseling department because stress has a lot to do with test taking. So kind of wanted to touch on that. And then the last hour, we're going to look into your content. Those of you that contacted me, I pulled up a resource guide for you, and we're going to dig into your content and give you some study materials and resources to help you. So I have a whole resource page that hopefully is going to better prepare you for the exam. So the best thing we're hoping you get out of this is preparation. So when you walk into that testing room, you're confident. And you feel confident about taking your exam. So we reached out to what is your Learning Center, Enhanced Learning Center?
Learning Enhancement Center.
Learning Enhancement Center, which focuses on helping students with assessments. What else do you do? So Miss Rosemarie Pilarczyk works with that center, so she's going to be up the first hour. And then we have Israel with the counseling department, who is a grad student who's going to work on the mindfulness, and then we'll do a breakout with your content specific. So those of you who are doing Pearson, we're going to go to the room adjacent to this room, and the rest of you will stay in here with me, and we'll get into your content. So any questions before we get started? Okay, Ms. Pilarczyk.
Let's see, we want to go to Netflix, is that what, no. Want to go to the university, why is that not an option? All right. So I'll see if I can multitask. It's Saturday morning, I'm not sure about that, but I'll try anyway. So let's see where. So I think this one is, I might need you guys to help me.
What are you looking for?
I'm looking for my email. Outlook dot what?
Com.
Okay, thank you. So I had all this on my flash drive, and my flash drive is in my computer at home. But I always plan for something to go wrong. Okay, I'm a nurse by trade, if you will, registered nurse. I've been a registered nurse for, it seems like 100 years, but it's only been 45.
Mine would just click sign in right there. Next to get premium.
At the bottom.
Thank you. You've tried too many times with it. I only did it once. Okay.
You got did you do the cap?
Oh, it didn't ask me to do that, did it?
Change it. 30.
WX
Five.
5 K G E.
The password also.
Enter your password. Okay, here we go. Password. There's no cap lock on it.
And enter
This
the
other
little,
thing.
yeah, do that.
X V M X 4 N. Okay, that's not working. Would you like to save your password? No, because it is not right according to you. I can get it on my phone. I don't think that's gonna help us, honey.
Dr. Goins, can she forward it to your email from her phone?
Yeah.
Okay.
Forward it from your phone and I'll
Sure.
put it up on mine.
So here's the lesson. If you have everything programmed into your computer when you go to work, and you just turn it on and you hit some buttons, you don't remember how you got there. All right.
Are we on the right page?
So what are you doing now? Let's see.
I don't know if that's
Well, so we used to go, oh, it's
now try. What was yours?
our Polar.
That's what it is.
All right, thank you. You're welcome. It's only a good morning if you work.
Hey, they were my class. I was thinking, was that your grandson?
Yeah. So, I've been a nurse for a long time, and I've taught nurses since 1973. And I taught in a variety of different kinds of programs. And in 2007, I moved to North Carolina because my daughter got accepted to work on her doctoral degree at Wake Forest. There we go. And we thought we would move up here to get a little closer. And I remember her taking the praxis. I've never taken the praxis. Do we have a little jobbing? Yeah, we have a little jobbing. So because I'm so tall, I can't see over that screen, and I'm gonna come up here and talk to y'all from here. I was recruited to come and teach in the nursing program here at Pembroke, let me get it right, I'm saying it like a Yankee. I'm a recovering Yankee, okay, so y'all excuse me. and taught here for 3 years, and then I had I decided I was gonna try to find something easier for a while because I was working on getting my doctoral degree in education, and trying to do that and go to school was really a tough thing at the same time. So, I got a job at Scotland High School working in the health science department. Now, let me just tell you, that's a very humbling experience because it was not easier. It was probably one of the hardest jobs I've ever had. I've worked intensive care, I've taught all kinds of stuff. My master's is in psychiatric nursing, and I'm used to being on the inpatient psych unit. Some days I wonder if it's me or them. However, teaching in a high school, and particularly when you don't have the background of a teacher of that age group, was very challenging. So, my heart goes out to you because I know that this is a challenging job. And I ended up with a grandson because my husband and I adopted a set of special needs twins who were almost 8 years old at the time we adopted them. And unfortunately, lots of times what happens in life goes along with you. And so my son and his wife had a little boy, and they were living in a rescue mission and were not able to take care of him. So they came to live with us, and long story a little shorter, he was about 7 weeks old when they all came to live with us, and they moved on and he moved in. So he's ours, and I know God has a sense of humor because I'm 67 years old trying to raise a kindergartner. So you all do a good job, whatever area that you're gonna be teaching in. So again, we're looking at praxis. To pass or not to pass, that is the question. Now, Camille mentioned something that sometimes we go into test and we go into the test with, well, I'll take it the first time and just see how it goes. In the program that I teach in, which is a nursing program, our students also take an end of their course test called the NCLEX. It's a national licensing examination for nurses. So here's what happens with that. Even though we preach, and we don't just tell, we preach the whole time we have them, you've got to be prepared the first time. We know that some of them just think we're blowing smoke. And consequently, they go in and they don't pass. And for us, it is a major problem, us in nursing, because the State Board of Nursing in North Carolina judges schools of nursing on your first time pass rate. So if our students don't pass the first time, we get a bad mark. And it doesn't matter if they go back and pass the very next time, which often happens, it doesn't count for us. If our students go and take that test in another state, we don't get credit for it. So it becomes very, very imperative for us, and we become very concerned. So we try to do some prep. And so as I was looking at the preparation for this morning, I wanted to go and look at the praxis and get some ideas on what you're preparing for and what's the differences in terms of coming from the preparation people's side of the situation. So we want to all pass the first time. Now, how many of you are already in a teaching position? Just so I get a feel for it. Okay. And the rest of you are in the School of Education and you're finishing up. Okay, so here's the good thing, I think. If you're in the School of Education, you've got a little more time, if you will, to get ready for where you're going. Oftentimes, once you're in a teaching position, you're limited by, they tell you, okay, we've given you this job, and in a year you have to have your praxis. And I know about teaching in the school system. I may not know about the praxis, but I know that it's a daily grind, if you will. It's not a matter of, see, I thought, I have to say, I was a little haughty attitude when I went to teach at the high school, because man, I have 2 master's degrees. I was almost finished with my doctoral degree, and I'm teaching high schoolers about healthcare. Well, I know that. Guess what? They didn't care. They couldn't care less. Those kids didn't care what I knew from the man in the moon. They cared about how much I cared about them. And that's what I had to learn. So once in a while, I could slip in a little information, if you will, about healthcare, but the most important thing was being able to address their needs, and they're not going to be able to learn. Remember Maslow? They're not going to be able to learn until we have made sure some of those basic needs are met. So, let's see if I can do this. No, I can't do that either. So, am I a little challenged here with my technology? This little guy's supposed to move things, but it doesn't matter. It's pretty good. This one doesn't work either. So should I be able to move it when I hit the button? Yes, I should, right? I'm Polish, okay, but that's never been a problem for buttons. What do you think? Are these smartphones?
Yeah, they should.
So I can touch it, huh? Oh, you know what I was trying to do is hit this.
Is it? And that it should?
That's all right, well, this works on, I'm flexible. So here we are, Saturday morning, where would we really like to be? That's right, just like this little puppy curled up someplace, or at least, I get up early, but I don't have to get dressed. You know, nightgown is my preference. So we are here to get some content, if you will, to get some help with a very important test. And you think, this lady could use some help with her technology. So let's see if we can get this to work. I checked all these out before I came. So I'm pressing here. Control, click is supposed to work. I hate the thought that they're taping this. Anyway, this first address, and I'll make sure that these are available to you, but the first address, and I can probably pull it up just going through the internet, gives you some basic information about the North Carolina requirements. So each state has different requirements for the NCLEX, if you will. And we'll send you, you have everybody's email, right? We'll send you this whole presentation so you don't have to try to write all this down. But it's going to be really important for those of you who are still in school, if you're thinking about going to another state to practice, you want to find out what their requirements are, because their requirements are going to be a little different. In nursing, our requirements are the same. Everybody takes, excuse me, the same state board exam, not the exact same one, but they're in the same company. And the company is a Pearson company as well. But different states have different kinds of requirements. So please check. And don't wait until a few weeks before it's time to graduate or take the test. Everybody in this room, if you haven't been to the website, you need to go to the Praxis website because, excuse me, there's a lot of information. This Magash company works hand in hand with the Praxis folks, and they give you some helpful hints there on passing the first time. And the really important thing is planning. If you are a business person, and we're going to pretend we're business people because we're in the business building, right? So, I hate this computer. Sorry. So the first thing I want you to do is think about learning about your test, okay? Learn about the specific test that you're going to be taking. And if we would have been successful in bringing up that website, we could have looked up all the different praxis. Now, I found it interesting. There is a praxis there for healthcare. So, Camille, you probably know the answer to this. Why didn't I take the praxis?
It's just individually, it's dependent on the course of study that DPI sends down when you come in as a lateral entry
Got it.
teacher.
Okay, all right. So I was curious. Not complaining. Please understand, I'm not complaining. Well, any test that I don't have to take is one less test, okay? So I appreciate that. But you want to know about the specific test. And when you go in, it will tell you the number and percentage of questions in each category. So taking this praxis is two things I want you to remember from this talk. You need to know how to take the test, and you need to know the content for the test. And much of the time, students, and I'm going to use the term students generically, when we go to take a test, we often don't fail because we don't know the content. We fail because we don't know how to take that particular test. So I'm hoping I can give you a few ideas on how to be test savvy, okay? My daughter took the praxis, and she has taken a number of tests in her life. She has her PhD in cell biology. Now, I think that sounds pretty smart, but she will tell you she's not all that smart. She just said, Mom, I learned how to take tests, and I learned how to study. So that was, and she says, getting that master's and getting that PhD the key thing that she felt helped her was perseverance. She said, you just can't quit. And oftentimes when things get tough, that's what we want to do. We just say, ah. And I've been there lots of years. Sometimes I get up in the morning and I've got a lot of things going on and I think, it's time to retire. I just need to retire. Well, really what I'm saying is I just want to quit. This is too hard. I don't want to just keep going. But you can do this. You've gotten this far and you can do it. It's just going to take some perseverance. So know the number and percentage of questions. So we know on Praxis it's always going to have a given number of questions. And you're going to see in a minute the content that's there. So if you take the number of questions and the percentages, you can figure out how heavily the sections are weighted, right? So then you say to yourself, okay, well, there's a lot of questions on here on cell division, so I've got to focus more on cell division. Looks like there's only 2 questions that have to do with, I can't think of another science example, Pythagoras theory, that goes back to math. So if I don't get that, I don't get it. Now, I also want you to remember that these tests were not designed for you to be able to answer every question. They are designed for the minimum learner to the brilliant learner. So when you get into the test, and I'm a little ahead of myself, but I just want to emphasize, don't panic. If you come across a question that you have no idea, what should you do? Skip it, that's right. Don't stay there, okay? Don't stay there, because if you stay there, what's going to happen to your mind? That's right, you're going to panic, you're going to block a little stuff, things that you normally know just aren't going to come. Most of these tests in the testing environment will allow you to have a scratch paper, and they will give you the scratch paper, and they will give you the pencil, so that you don't bring any information with you. But if there's a particular, and again I'm going to go into math, if there's a particular formula that you have trouble remembering but you know you're going to need, when you get that scratch paper and you sit down to take your test, you write that formula right then. You get it off your mind and you can relax a little bit. We have lots of little memory things that we do in nursing, and so I tell them, write all those things down. We have formulas with medication stuff, so write that down when you first sit down to take the test so you don't have to think about that anymore. It's kind of like, okay, that's one less thing I have to stress over. So know the number and percentage of the questions, and that's in the Praxis information. It tells you ahead of time, based on your test, how many questions, what percentage of the total number. Know the skills measured by the test. It will tell you. They are not trying to trick you. You may have had teacher-made tests in your educational experience that are trying to see just if you can figure out where they're going, but that's not their objective. They want to know that you are going to be a safe educator and a competent educator, so they're not trying to trick you. So look at what's being measured by the test. If I were taking the Praxis in a nursing area, I know that they would ask me questions about delegation, because I have to know who I can give this task to and who I have to keep. I'm going to have to know about prioritizing, okay? Because in healthcare, we have to establish priorities when people die. So I know, no matter what test I ever take, those are going to be 2 key things. And you probably have an idea, if you're a major in a particular area, what do you think is going to be most important? Tell me again your area.
Biology.
Okay, biology. So what do you think they're going to, if you were writing a Praxis, what would you ask somebody? What area do you think is really important in biology?
Well, I asked them about the cellular theory, and then like the cell division, the main basics.
Right, yeah, some basics. So you can look at those things and say, all right, these are some key things. All right, and then we're going to plan the work and work the plan. My husband, in his very, very young days, was at Amway, and I don't know if some of you have even heard of Amway, but they were really into business and multi-level marketing and that sort of thing. So I have a couple of Amway expressions in here because they're good. So you're going to plan the work and then work the plan. And we're going to look at practicing with sample test questions. Again, one of the things that we have found, oh gosh, that worked that time, I'm impressed, is that you need to do 2 things. You need to know the content, but then you need to take and practice questions. I'm talking about lots of questions. 50, 60 questions a week, just questions about anything that has to do with your content area, because that's going to help to make you test savvy. That's what's going to help to make you test savvy. Just getting your mind to think like the test questions. So let's look at this one here. We've got, which of the following is a flavor made from beans? Now when we're looking at, there's a variety of different kinds of test questions. And this particular one is a selected response. And usually with selected response, how many answers are we going to give? One. Okay, good. You got it. So when we look at selected response, what are we looking at? We're looking at the best answer. If I am a good test writer, I'm going to give you 4 in a multiple choice, right? And 2 of those, you're going to be able to figure out right away, those are not the answer. And then the other 2, you're going to have to really sweat over a little bit because they may both be correct. And that's where we get ourselves in a little trouble. It's not a matter of just the correct answer. It is the best answer. So you're going to look at that. So when we're looking at which is a flavor made from beans, we've got strawberry, cherry, vanilla, and mint. So how would you answer this question? Because all of them are flavors, right? Okay. So your job is to decide what? Which one is made from beans? That's it. Okay, so you have, when we first glance at this question, we see which one's the flavor, right? We're not paying attention to what the question's really, which one's the flavor, but this is which flavor is made from beans. Okay, so is cherry, where does cherry flavor come from? The meat of the cherry, right? All right, how about mint? That's a leaf, okay. How about strawberry? That's the berry again. So how about vanilla? Bean, that's right, okay. So we're gonna say vanilla bean, okay? So the first thing we did was we tried to, in this case, we weren't able to really pick out 2 for sure that weren't right because we had to kind of think about each one of us we went through. And then go back and verify your answer. Now one easy way to do that is to kind of change the question around and stick in your answer. So vanilla is a flavor made from beans. If you're not sure you have the right answer, then kind of stick that, or cherry is a flavor made from beans. No, there's no cherry beans, not that I know of. I gotta tell you, when we moved to the south, I learned real quickly, y'all have a lot of beans down here we don't have up in Ohio, okay? So beans, peas, we only have one kind of pea, and that was what we call here English peas. We call them green peas, but you can't call them green peas because we got all kinds of other peas here. So you have to think about your environment, if you will. Get rid of those incorrect answers. Don't be intimidated by words that you don't understand. There may be some terms in a test that you're taking that you're not sure of. I gave a test the other day to, these are senior students, and I had a sentence that said, the family alluded to the fact, blah, blah, blah. And do you know how many of my students didn't know what the word allude was? Okay. Now, there may be some of you out there, you don't raise your hand, because you don't have to admit. But there may be people out there now who don't know what the word allude meant. So, okay, you don't know what the word meant. That's a word probably you need to know, but it doesn't matter at the point when you get into that test, right? So what can you do, okay? Try to state that sentence if you can in your own words. Try to figure out what they're trying to ask. Take the word allude out. The family said something about, this happened to be a question about living wills. The family said something about this living will, okay? So how does that have to do with my question? So if there's terms in there you're not familiar with and you're in the middle of the test, that's a suggestion, okay? Usually, we try to stay away from, when we're test writers, we try to stay away from the terms not, least, and except. Now, I don't know, everything that I've read so far about praxis did not address that, but always look for those words. And again, most test writers are taught to bold those words in a sentence, because again, we're not trying to trick you, but that may be the only way we can test that concept. So look for those words, not, least, or except, to be bolded, okay? And let me also tell you, I'm not giving you a lot of information you can't find on your own, because I went into Praxis and there's a study manual that's in there, and there's one for each of your specific specialties, but the first parts are the same regardless of what particular area. So this will be available to you, and you'll have the website, and maybe, depending on our time, we'll see if we can pull it up. Okay, so what about if you have some questions that are graphs, tables? Look at the question first and try to figure out what are they really asking, because I don't know about you, but sometimes graphs and tables can just floor me. I'm not exactly sure what all they're showing me. So then there is going to be more information than what I need to answer that question, because it's a graph or a table. So what do I need to know from this graph? Are they just asking me the percentage of the population that was born before 1960? If that's my question, I don't need to know all this other kind of stuff. So look at what they're asking and try to look at that particular chart graph and pick out just that answer. Don't let yourself get overwhelmed with looking at those graphs and charts. And then there are some that are what we call unfamiliar formats. So in school or in your previous testing experiences, have you had questions? We tend to be real heavy into multiple choice questions, okay? That's what a lot of folks, they're easy to grade, they're not so hard to write, and they really don't test specifics, okay? If I give you a fill in the blank, how easy is that going to be to answer? Not as easy unless you really know the answer, right? You got to know a word. And when you get to my point in life, you might have a good idea about what it is, but you can't put your tongue on that exact word. Well, if somebody's asked me to fill in a blank and I only get credit if I know that exact word, it's a little more stressful for me. But there will be some of what we call alternative responses. The alternative response that our students hate is what we call the select all that apply. Have any of you ever had that one? Mm-hmm. Yes, I see these moans out there. Okay, so that's a common one. Now, why is that a common? Because we want to know all that you know about that information. If you have 5 choices and you can pick out one right one, good for you. But if there are 3 others that are just as equally right and you need that information to function, like all the following are steps in how to make a sample volcano for students, you better know all of the steps, right? Because if you mix the, what is it, baking soda and something else too soon? Who's made one of those little sample volcanoes for kids? Anybody here? All right, so it's baking soda and something else, right, that you mix together? Vinegar, okay. So what happens if you mix that too soon, or if you don't put the right proportions? Messes up your whole demo, right? So they may ask you that question. They may ask you that to put them in the order, okay? I don't know that they're gonna ask you about making a sample volcano, but that was the only example I could come. But the point is, you may have those select all apply. So the little trick of the trade is, when you have questions like select all that apply, look at it like a true and false. Each of your options say, is this true or is this false? If it's false, you don't select it. So think of those like a true and false. Then we also have what we call a constructed response. That's a fancy name for short essays or short answers, okay? So you may be asked to do that. I was here 2007 to 2009, and Dr. Canaday, some of you might remember Dr. Canaday, he's just recently gone on to become either a president or a provost at another university, but he and I were on the QEP committee, and I loved him. I mean, he was just a really fun kind of guy, and we're on this committee, and I was in school at the time, and I had a paper to write. And so he said, well, Rose, what are you doing? I said, well, I got this paper to write, and I'm just, I can't seem to get started writing, can't see. And he said, well, have you done your outline? And I said, foolishly, because Dr. Kennedy is an English person, okay? I said, oh, no, I don't ever do an outline. And he just kind of looked at me. Now, this is peer-to-peer now, okay? And I'm appearing pretty silly, because I had never been taught to do an outline when I'm writing a paper, quite honestly. Just never was taught that. So I tried to change the shade of red that my face was probably at that point, and I said, oh, well, that's an interesting. So I went home and I try to write an outline. And I wasn't used to it, so it was very painful, but I made myself do it because I wasn't gonna go back and sit next to him the next week at the committee, because we all sat next to each other and we told jokes together, that sort of thing, and not have tried doing an outline. So it was painful, but it worked. So when you're getting ready, they give you that short answer, and you have to practice this ahead of time, okay? Make yourself a quick outline, just like you would if you were writing a paper to turn in somewhere. Make yourself that quick outline. So you want to do several things. Let me move to my next one. There we go. So when we're doing constructive response, these are some key things I want you to remember. Answer accurately. Make sure what you're answering, what you're putting in there is accurate. This is not the time to blow smoke, okay? Y'all know where I'm coming from? If you're not sure about it, if you're not real sure about it, don't put it in there, because they're reading this content for accuracy. Answer completely. Sometimes what happens is we get started and we don't finish that thought process. That's why an outline is really helpful. And if you can identify where you want to go with your answer, write that down and then work backwards. What information do you need to give this person that's going to demonstrate that you know this information? And that's what it's all about. You're demonstrating to the person who's evaluating your exam that you know this information. Answer the question that's asked. That's the other problem. Sometimes we read something, our mind looks at it, and we start answering a question that wasn't what we need to answer. So without getting in trouble for talking in the testing scene, if you have to say it to yourself a couple of times, what question are they really asking, okay? Or, what am I supposed to respond to? Give a thorough and detailed response. If you know there's some key things, even if you can't quite fit it all together, make sure you include those key things that you know are important, and then reread your response. This is the teacher in me coming out. But I can't tell you how many times people send me things. Our students do a weekly, what's called a reflection. So they spend time in the hospital or in clinics and so forth working with patients and clients, and they write a reflection every week. And that reflection is very detailed and very, they're often 5 and 6 pages. And what do? They write back the agenda to me of what they saw. They are not reflecting on it. I want to know how you felt about it, okay? I'm a psych person. I'm a touchy-feely person. Tell me how was this interesting? Were you bored to death? Was this something you knew anything about? Was it totally new information? I went to a conference on Tuesday, and my students went too. Well, I know what they talked about at the conference, so I already know that piece. And when we're talking about reading your responses, so they send this to me, and I know they're tired. They've had a long week. It sounds like totally illiterate individuals sending me these responses because they haven't read the sentence. They've left out the verbs, they've left out the subjects, they've run sentences together, and I'm I'm trying to read it at the end of the day, and sometimes I have to read them out loud to figure out where we're going because the sentence is so long. There was a whole paragraph in one period. You probably needed more than one sentence, right? What's the rule? Paragraph usually has 3 to 5 sentences, right? And that first sentence is going to tell you what the paragraph's about. See, life hasn't changed. I went to elementary school in the late 50s, okay, but that's always been the same. That first sentence is always going to be important. So reread your response. It's going to really be helpful to us. Okay, so if you failed to plan, then you planned to fail. If you get ready to go into praxis, and a week before you're going in there, you start thinking about it, you have planned to fail. Because it's just not going to happen for you. So you can't read this because it was put up there as a sample. And again, when you get this PowerPoint presentation, but this is in the praxis plan. And the topics, the first one there says content covered. The second one is description. The third one is how well do you know the content on a scale of 1 to 5. Then it asks for what resources do I need? Where can I find them? What day am I going to study the content, and when do I have it complete? Now, I love this plan. I love this plan because I'm a planner type person. My mother used to joke about my to-do list. My guess is my mother never made a to-do list in her life. That's my guess. And she did 82 years of living, so she did just fine. But I am a planner, and I want it written down. How many of you have a fancy planner? Okay, welcome to the world. Okay, that's good. But the point is, you've got to have some kind of a plan. So, who has a date already established for the praxis? Okay, when you taking it?
November 17th.
November 17th, okay, so you're getting tight, okay? And let's just say, tell me your first name.
T-Val.
Tavel, okay, let's just say Tavel's been pretty busy with life, and he really hasn't spent a whole lot of time looking at content, okay? So what he's gotta do is he's gotta put down November 16th as his endpoint and work back. So he's gonna get all of that, and the same thing goes for you guys as well. Think about when you wanna take that test and then work back. Now, I think, from what I saw in these content areas, that you need to have a year's preparation. And so when you get hired with the school board and they tell you have a year, I'm sure they don't tell you this, because that's just not what we do. That's when you need to start making your plan. Now, the good news is that third category over there is how much do I know about it? So you put all the content in one area, and then you put in that second area, you describe what it is. So we're listing cell division, okay? And then under description, what do you need to know about cell division? And all of this is in the Praxis study guide. You don't have to figure this out on your own. You go in there, they've got a long, involved outline of all the stuff. So you just go in there, and I'm a copy and paste kind of person. You guys copy and paste? Okay, so you go in there and you copy it all and you put it into content and description. Then it says, how well do I know this on a scale of 1 to 5? So that's gonna come you. If it's stuff that you're familiar with, you could probably say, well, it's pretty good. It doesn't mean you're not gonna touch on it, but you're gonna give that a 5. If it's stuff you don't even know where this word came from, and I shared with Kevin earlier, I was looking at the math stuff just to kind of get a feel for what was in there. Now, math is not my area of expertise, I'm going to tell you. I looked there, and about the third paragraph, I said, boy, I don't even know these terms. I don't want to look at this, it makes me too nervous. So those would all be zeros for me. Maybe a one, but probably zeros. So when you get done with those 3 columns, you know exactly where you've got to focus, and then you're going to figure out how much time. Well, it's something you know. You probably are going to be able to do that in a one-day kind of setting. And we'll talk about what your day needs to be in a little bit. And then, where do I get these resources from? There's nothing worse than sitting down to do something, trying to learn something, and you don't have the resource. So you identify it ahead of time. Do I need to get some books from somebody who's already taken it? Is this in one of my textbooks? So those of you in school, this is a good thing, because you still have some of your textbooks, hopefully, at this point. Get all that stuff gathered up and put it someplace where you don't have to move it, because you want to be able to go in there when you have a little chunk of time and work with it. And then you're going to plan, when am I going to start and when am I going to finish that subject? I would encourage you, if you can, to get your plan so that you're finished at least a week before you have to take the test. So that last week, you can go back to some of those areas where maybe you felt a little uncomfortable. So I love index cards. Those are my favorite things, okay? You guys just take one and pass them around. The index cards don't stay places too well. So my next thing that I really like is I like Post-it notes. So as you're studying, as you're reading, I want you to use these little Post-it notes, okay? And you can get them at the Dollar Tree. They're 4 packs for $1, so everybody could afford $1 to pass the praxis, right? And here's what you're going to do. You're going to write things on there. In a minute, we'll talk more about what you're going to write. But they're really nice because you can stick them in your book. You don't ruin anything. You can put them on the edge of the book so that it'll stick out when you're going back through, or on your outline or your sample plan. Like, let's say you're studying cell division, and in the process of studying cell division, you have a question about something else. Don't stop and look it up. Write yourself a little note. Yes, sir?
Just take just one of these?
No, take the whole pack. A whole pack of, sorry.
Yeah. Or if you need to have
so
a
might
pack, yeah.
split it up.
Yeah. Here you go. Here you.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the Post-it notes before we move on. So when you're reading, no, let's do that toward the end. So some questions that often come up when you're looking at making your plan. Does everybody understand when I'm talking about the plan? So you've got your columns, and you're gonna fill in these columns based on what your plan is. So this column here is called content covered, and those are just topics. This is called description. So in this particular example, under the content covered, it says crafts, the structure and language skills, interpreting tone, understanding the tone and how somebody's saying something. And this happened to be a reading test. So under description, it says, I'm going to determine the author's attitude toward materials that were discussed in the reading section. I'm trying to figure out where was this author trying to go with this information. How well do I know this content? Well, I'm pretty good at that, so I gave that a 4. What resources do I need? Well, I'm going to look at my middle and high school English textbook that I have available. And we may not have some of these resources, so this gives you some time to gather these things up. Where am I going to find them? Well, I should be able to get some of these things at the college library. Maybe I've got a colleague that has some. Talk to another teacher who may have some of those resources. And then I'm going to put, what day am I going to approach this? And remember, we're working backwards. Here's the date of the test, and then we're going to work backwards on our chart so that we'll be hopefully kind of going from the foundational things all the way up to the higher level learning. So should you guess? Praxis recommends yes, okay, that your score is based on the number of questions that you answer correctly. Now there are some tests, it's been a long time since I took the SAT, but I believe that the SAT is one of those ones that you don't guess on because they subtract your wrongs from your rights, but that's not Praxis, okay? Your score is based on the ones you get correct. So, bless you. So there's no penalty for an incorrect answer, so yes, you should guess. Try to make it an educated guess, but you should guess. Can you answer the questions in any order? Yes, you can, and this is another good one. In the nursing NCLEX, a disability of that test is that students can never go back. And the reason they can't go back is because if I answer this question correctly, then they will give me another question that's more difficult, either on the same subject or a different subject. So I can't ever go back taking the NCLEX, but you can. So if you don't know a question, you write down the number of that question and you move right on, okay? If you're pretty sure about the answer, put your first answer, right? Should you change your answers? Probably not. Most of the research shows that it's what we've learned is in there somewhere, and it tends to surface just a little bit when we're answering the questions. Now, it may not surface for some of us because it's so far down there, but point is, the more recently you have referred to that information, the more likely it is that your first response is going to be correct. If you had no idea at all when you were going through the first time and you go back, then you just go with your gut, what seems to be the right answer, because there's no harm in taking a guess at it, okay? You can skip questions. It says, remember that questions left unanswered are treated the same as questions answered incorrectly. So it's your advantage to answer every question. There are no trick questions, and we've already talked about that. There are no patterns, okay? There are no patterns. Now, when I was growing up, sometimes teachers, they had to hand grade things in those days, so they would make a pattern in the grading so that it would go ABD, ABD, whatever, so that they could grade them very easily. There are no patterns. We have computers now. These are computer programmed. They are your test may not have the same questions as someone else. Not all of the questions will count toward your grade. When we are we're putting tests together, we have to make sure that the questions that we have are good questions, okay? And so we're verifying the ability of that question to really ask you what we want it to ask. So there are going to be a certain number of questions in there that really don't count toward your grade. So what's the take-home message? Answer everything the best you can, right? Okay. And it says you can write on scratch paper, make notes to yourself, or write anything you want to. I have students who come in and the top of their test paper has a scripture on the top of it every time, because they need to remind themselves they've got some help coming from somewhere. If you have a fun quote that's gonna, help you to remember something, write it on there. There's nothing wrong. It's your scratch paper. It was given to you by the testing site. They know that it didn't have anything when they gave it to you, so whatever you want to write on there. We've talked about, so now we're on to looking at test. Okay, these are Rosie's rules for reading, okay? I decided if Robert could have rules, then I could have rules at this point. So here's my rules for reading, and that's what I want to tell you about, our little sticky notes. When you go to sit down to read, does this happen to you? Yeah, that's right. Okay. Yeah, that's exactly right. It depends on what it is. I have, in the last couple of years, actually read a novel. I haven't had the luxury of reading a novel in a lot of years. Everything I've read has been associated with healthcare, medicine, science, whatever kinds of things. And I find it's amazing. I could sit up till 1 a.m. reading those novels. You think I could read my nursing textbook till 1 a.m? No, I cannot. So let's look at what happens. What about how long can you sit and read before you start going somewhere out there? 30 minutes, okay, that's right. We know that our brain just doesn't take, so in education we have chunking, right? You guys you educators heard of chunking? Okay, so what we do is we say, and our kids in the classroom don't make 30 minutes. They don't make 30 minutes. I could never come up with enough chunks, let me tell you. But so we've got to think our brains are the same, okay? And some of us, it's the end of the day. We've had all kinds of stuff going on. You're sitting down. So I'm trying to help you to focus on what you want to get done. So you're going to use your little sticky notes. When you get your textbook, don't just start reading. A lot of our textbooks are pretty boring, for starters. And you're going to put yourself to sleep, just like this girl did. So you take the title and you turn it into a question. The title of the textbook might say, Fluid and Electrolyte Balance. So I'm going to turn that into a question. So what's important about fluid and electrolyte balance? And then I'm going to look at the objectives at the beginning of the chapter of the material I'm reading, or I'm going to look at my syllabus, if I have a syllabus and we're doing something in a classroom, and look, what does that professor, what does that teacher, what does the praxis want me to know about fluid and electrolyte balance? And then I'm going to look for the answers. Now, we have a few OCD people perhaps in the room. I am OCD, but not about studying. I'm OCD about folding my towels. But what do we usually do when a teacher gives us a list of questions to answer? Do we read the material and go back and answer the questions? No, we don't. We just look up the answers. So that's what you're going to do. That's how you've trained your brain, so you're going to do the same thing. You figure out what the questions are and you look up the answers. Depends on the material you're reading. Some will have some pretty pictures. Look at the pictures. We learn a lot from pictures. But ask yourself the questions and read the material only to answer the questions. So you're not reading all that material. So you're going to, when you make your plan, I don't want you to plan to sit and read or do anything for more than 45 minutes at a time. The mind will only absorb what the seat will endure, right? And we're getting close to our time here. So, this one looks like it wants to work. Yes. Now it's gonna. It says it wants to work. All right, so these are in here. How to become a teacher, teacher helps, the certification exam tips. Skip the questions, we've talked about that. Pay attention to the time, okay? There's gonna be an on-screen clock for you, pay attention to it. If you've skipped 10 questions and you've got those numbers written down, try to allot enough time at the end so you can get to them. Read all the possible answers before selecting one. This would be my problem. I'm reading something, I get an answer in my mind, and then I just look for that answer instead of reading all the possibilities. That's when we run into trouble, because the one that popped up in my mind may not be the best answer. It's a correct answer perhaps, but not the best. So we want to read all the possible answers, check your answers. No one's expected to know all the answers. Very important. Use your energy to take the test, not to get frustrated. Really important, because how many times do we get so upset about something we can't focus on what we need to? I think they call that road rage. All right. Check on your testing environment. If you have had accommodations in your educational experience, there are accommodations that are offered. Some places find out what the costs are for the test, what you need to do. Now, you all are very, very fortunate that you're involved in a program that's going to pay those costs because, and again, I'm going to go back to my experience, our nursing students pay $350 every time they take the NCLEX. That would be a motivation enough for me to pass it the first time. Okay. So I'm out of bed, I made it to the keyboard, what more do you want? And that's my story, and I'm sticking with it. Can I entertain any questions that you might have? I will forward this to Camille in just a moment, and she'll make it available to all of you, and I apologize that I wasn't able to pull up those sites. Maybe real quick I can, GTS, let's see what happens here. Okay, so it's going to let you look at all kinds. Here's the practice test. Here's the information about the test, how to register for the test. You're going to select a particular state for testing requirements. See, all the states are there, and it'll tell you what you need in your state. It's a great resource. So if you just write ets.org, you can find everything that we've covered today. Frequently asked questions. There is a see if this is the one we want. There's going to be all of the various areas that you might need to test for, and when you go on there, there's going to be a study plan. Most of them are about 40 or 50 pages of information on the internet, and you don't have to print them, but you can. Unfortunately, I'm a print person. I grew up, and I like to be able to underline and highlight and that sort of thing, but they're all there, so that's available to you for the future. Thank you all for getting up so early in the morning.
And those of you who are taking the praxis, we do have resources for you today. Pearson, we have a separate resource for our elementary. So we have that for you today to actually have. So what we're gonna do now, we're gonna take a quick break before we transition to the next section. So about 5 after 10, we'll get started. Okay, what was your email? Art. I had to use here. We have 3 art people. What was your name?
Brittany, I'm just written on there.
So you hadn't signed up yet? Okay, so I need you to sign in. What was your area?
Science education.
Secondary high school? Okay. Oh, she did tell me to sign in. I have art. You know where it has.
What do you mean you didn't get to do anything? Oh, yeah, still get to do something now. That means you get to do it.
See, in chapel here, ours are practice. Yes, working.
Okay, some of them are in the paper.
Yeah, that's what ours are. And I just got my favorite.
I've screwed up more times than that, so I'm all right with it.
Are you having fun?